It's almost been a year since we've moved here to Quebec, and in that time I have seen only one Alfa Romeo on the road. Not one Alfa Romeo Stelvio, not one new Alfa Romeo, but one entirely. And I don't know what the problem is with that. When Fiat Chrysler Automotive Group decided to bring the Alfa Romeo brand back to North America, I can guarantee you that automotive enthusiasts all around this continent jumped for joy, and they rejoiced because this is a brand that every car enthusiast seems to love for some reason. But then why is it that none of them are on the road? Why don't I see any of these on the road except for the one, which I'm pretty sure was this press car somewhere in this area a few months ago? Well, I don't really know, and we're hopefully going to be able to find that out together as we go through this video. So we are going to be showing you everything about this and everything you need to know if you are in the market for a 2018 Alfa Romeo Stelvio TI Sport and you're curious to know about it. Now, I was hoping to have a number of different Alfa Romeos to be able to show off, not necessarily to review, but just to be able to show different models, similar to what we did with the Kia Stinger video a couple weeks ago. We had an enthusiast reach out to us, and then we went to one of the dealers to be able to show off another one of the cars. But Alfa Romeos are always very unique, and that's one of the things that I wanted to be able to show off when we did this video, because this is a very unique looking car, and much like other Alfa Romeos before, they'll have a very acquired taste to it. Now, this is an SUV, so I can understand that people might not be as interested in it, but let's be honest here, the SUV market in North America is booming. There are a lot of companies that are just getting out of car sales completely, or they're seeing a lot of diminished returns on their car sales. That's why they're all going in the SUV direction. So it makes sense for Alfa Romeo to offer this as one of the first vehicles they brought back into North America. But again, it's just not selling, and I don't know why. I mean, it is a very unique looking car, as we mentioned. It has the power, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But let's talk about some of the features on the outside here. This is, relatively safety fully loaded. When we talk about safety tech, there is a sensor at the front. It is exposed, and you can actually see the wiring to go to it, but that works for your forward collision warning and radar cruise control. You do have LED running lights. They are pretty unique. You can certainly tell it is an Alfa as you're coming towards it, as well as the grille. It is quite unique to it, and I think it has a pretty aggressive front end, probably one of the most aggressive vehicles that we've seen in this type of market. Now, moving around the rest of the car, there isn't anything that's too surprising. I am actually impressed with the wiper blades. They are very similar to Mercedes-Benz's Magic wiper control system, where the nozzles are actually built in to the control arms here, so when you spray, you're actually not being distracted. Your visibility isn't reduced because your windshield is full of windshield washer fluid. It's actually built in there, so it is a little bit easier for you to be able to clean off and get it done. And I've noticed, it works pretty well. Bugs don't really get off too well, but that doesn't work with any vehicle that we featured. There's a keyless entry system. You put your hands in the door, or you can push the button to lock it, which makes sense. And the rear doors don't have any of that whatsoever. And then around back, we also have a pretty unique back end to it. It's interesting because we took a look at the specs online. This is smaller than something like a Mercedes GLC, and it is smaller than the BMW X3. But I feel that this back end is quite different. I don't know if it's bigger. We certainly can get as much stuff in here as we can in pretty much any other compact crossover SUV, but it's just the silhouette of it is different, and I'm not sure if it's good or bad. It's sort of in that range of coupe-like designs where the back end is much more sloped, but you don't lose any headroom in the back. All of the slope is really happening in the trunk area compared to other SUVs. They do have a power liftgate, which you would expect to have on a vehicle like this. It beeps a lot, and you can fit quite a bit in the back here. There's enough room. I wouldn't say it's probably the biggest amount of space possible, and you can flip the seats down from back here. They are just levers on the side, but it is a manual lever. Now, it does come with a spare tire, but it is the strangest one I've seen. It is a donut, and it comes deflated. So you pull it out, as this space saver technology says it does. You pull it out, and then you have to fill it up with the included pump in order to get it going. So it will take you an extra few minutes. If you are stranded on the side of the road, don't call roadside and want to do it yourself. You have to pump up the tire first. But for the most part, I don't see it being a big issue. I mean, a lot of manufacturers don't even include a spare tire anymore. No, the back end is still pretty acquired taste, as I would say. It's relatively straightforward. You do have the Alfa Romeo badge in the center, Stelvio on the right, and the Q4, which not to be confused with the Quadrifoglio. You know, they both start with the letter Q, and they both sort of sound like they have a 4 in it, but this just means that it is all-wheel drive. It has nothing to do with the performance version of this car. So don't be confused if you're driving along and you see that, you think, oh my gosh, this is a very fast car. No, it just happens to have 4-wheel drive. Now, I don't want Chrysler to get upset, but I want to use the word disappointed when it comes to this car. I have been excited about it for quite some time, but when I got into it, I was disappointed. And I think one of the things they could have done to alleviate that disappointment is the dashboard. For about, I think it's $995 Canadian, this and the top door cards would all be leather instead of this hard, softish kind of plastic. It's actually hard on top, a little more malleable on the edges here. If they put leather on there, I think it would help to enhance it a little bit. You do have leather in the center console here. Obviously the seats are leather and leather armrest, and the armrests on the door cards are all leather as well. So I think that would have helped a lot. For the $1,000 to do it for a press vehicle, they really should have, because otherwise the interior, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's not as luxury oriented as we've seen on other vehicles. It really does have more of a consumer oriented feel to it. The center console is relatively straightforward here. You do have dual zone automatic climate control, and it is interesting to note that both passengers up here can have the different fan directions as well as temperature and set it to automatic for either side. You still do have a unified fan speed, so it is a little bit better than we do find on most vehicles. Now, the other issue that I sort of have with this is the navigation system. It actually is quite dated, which is unfortunate because Chrysler uses a very good navigation. We talked about it with the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Wasn't really a very good system, Uconnect 3, but with the new 2018 models, Uconnect 4 is fantastic. They're not using it for this. I don't even think it is a version of it. It really is different, and it feels a lot more like an older version of BMW iDrive. But the problem is the maps are so basic. It's just green everywhere with blackish lines for the roads. I almost feel like I'm driving my 2001 BMW 7 Series. It's just not very useful. And this car is supposed to have Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, but because this came out just a little bit earlier in 2017, it doesn't have that update yet, and you can't do the update yourself. You have to take it to your Alfa Romeo dealership, and if you're here in Quebec, there's 3 of them, the whole province, so you have to take it to one of them to get them to update it. So I don't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto here to test, but I do find that the screen is just really small, and even though it's an 8.8-inch screen, it's a weird design for it. The only thing I do like is they've made it almost look like it's part of this entire center bezel here. So it's very difficult during the day to tell where the screen ends and the bezel begins, so it looks a little bit more Alfa Romeo-like. But other than that, there's not much to it. Now, there is one other little thing about this car that I'm actually quite impressed with, the HomeLink system up here on the driver's visor. Every single car we've driven, you can use HomeLink no matter what. The car's off, the car's broken into, you can use it. That's a big problem. If you park your car outside and you have HomeLink, somebody breaks into your car, pushes the button, they get into your house now. This car is much like, again, our 2001 7 Series. A lot of vehicles do not allow you to use HomeLink unless the ignition is on, so that way you have to have a key. This is the first vehicle we featured with a 2018 model year designation that has that built in. That is a phenomenal safety feature that a lot of people would not even be aware of, but it is crucially important if you do park your cars outside in front of your house and you don't like to get broken into. But the rest of the interior here is relatively straightforward. You do have a relatively basic center computer here. You can see your speed, and that's about it. And then you're reminded all over the car that you're driving an Alfa Romeo. It is written in script in the center console here. When you turn on the car, the logo comes up. You've got your grayscale logo here, and also in the back, the little privacy shield for the trunk has the Alfa Romeo script on it as well, so you can see it properly when you're in the rearview mirror. Plus, these super hard headrests have it embossed as well. So if you do get into an accident and your head is thrown back, you'll have a permanent etching of the Alfa Romeo logo in your skull. Now, I know it might sound like I'm just piling on the dislikes with this car. We have talked about a number of vehicles this year that we just haven't liked in general. But I have driven this car a lot. I've put a lot of kilometers on it, which is something I don't usually do when I don't like the car. So I do like it, but I like it for the wrong reasons. So I think we need to take it on the road and see a little bit more about what this Alfa Romeo has to offer. And I mentioned this very briefly, actually, back when we did the Kia Stinger, that there really is only one engine available offered on the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Now, you can get the Quadrifoglio, that is the 2.9 liter Ferrari-derived V6 engine that has 507 horsepower, which is pretty nice. But every other engine you get, as we also talked about a little bit earlier, is this one. This is the 2-liter turbo, and it produces 280 horsepower. It's certainly not bad. And again, if you're looking at the base model X3 or base model GLC 300, this has more power, but it's once you go up to the next trim for either of those vehicles that this gets overpowered very quickly. Now, I did mention that I like this car for all the wrong reasons, and usually when we do test drive, when we have a luxury vehicle, if it's the base model or entry trim, we'll talk about how it really just doesn't make sense, and it is all about the badge, and we'll say you should get something that's in the consumer segment. But I'm going to change my tune. It's going to be the complete opposite with this, because yes, the only reason you're buying this car is for the badge on the front, but that's the whole point of the car. It isn't meant to really be a luxury car. I don't feel that any of this is overly luxurious, even if it had the leather dashboard on top. It's not overly fast with this engine, and if you got the Quadrifoglio, it would be, but then there still are SUVs out there that have more power than this. So it's not the fastest car, it's not the most luxurious car, but it is the most Alfa Romeo of them all, and that's the whole point. If you're buying an Alfa Romeo, it's because you're buying an Alfa Romeo. Often you're probably not looking at the competition, but I think that's probably why they aren't selling here. If you're not really comparing it to something else, then you're just buying it for the brand. And when it comes to these sort of niche luxury cars, I consider Alfa Romeo certainly the most niche of them. But Volvo, Jaguar, especially here, where it's just a little less popular because people are buying Mercedes, BMW, Audi. So the Jags and the Volvos and obviously the Alfa Romeos just don't get sold as much. And really, when it comes to the Alfas, they don't get sold at all. We haven't seen any of them. And even driving around, we try our best to drive around and see what else is on the road. We haven't seen any Alfas. But it certainly gets a lot of looks. We haven't had anybody stop us like we did with the Kia Stinger, but we certainly have had a lot of people checking out the car. Either we're parked somewhere and I'll see them pointing at it and looking at it, or as we're driving by, they'll be staring at it because either they are curious, well, it's an Alfa, or they really just don't know what it is. It's an Alfa. It is part of the joy of driving this car. I don't know if it's the joy of owning it, because if you own this car out here in Actonville where we are, your closest dealer is about 100 kilometers away. I don't believe you could take them to your regular Dodge or Chrysler dealership, so you are pretty much limited to taking it to Alfa Romeo, and there are, I believe, 3 of them here in Quebec, so you don't really have a ton of options. They're all in Montreal. There's none even in Quebec City, so if you're in the province's capital, you're pretty much out of luck. Now let's talk about the drive, because that is relatively important. I've had this car in its D mode. It doesn't use a regular sport, eco, or normal mode. It uses Alfa Romeo DNA. And the D stands for dynamic, the N is for natural, or something, and the A is for A. Basically, it's sport mode, regular mode, and eco mode. I picked the car up in sport mode, and I've driven it completely in sport mode. And for the most part, too, I've been driving it in the paddle shifter modes, because I really do like these super big paddle shifters. It really does feel like you're driving a performance car with them, because when you're turning, you do still have a good amount of reach for your paddles. You can use the shifter here. I haven't really used it that much. The paddles do work quite well, but I do like it. It works pretty well. You can shift down, and it certainly brings the power up, and it has a decent sound on the inside. I don't know how good it sounds on the out, but once we're done with our driving segment here, we'll have a little exhaust note for you. We'll do the same thing we've done with some of the other cars. We'll take it from stop, rev up the gears, and then do some downshifting to see if there's anything that's really exciting with the exhaust note on this car. But for the most part, it does perform pretty well. I'm actually really impressed with the handling of it. For example, we're going to go around a nice corner here, and it's not a big one, but I can take it pretty quick. Certainly wouldn't be taking that any quicker in any other car. Not only did I take almost 60 kilometers an hour around a 90-degree turn, but the vehicle actually stayed pretty level. You saw I wasn't moving like you do in some other SUVs where there is a lot of body shift both inside and with the vehicle. You actually take the corners really well. That's part of the Alpha Link suspension system that they've developed. I think it works pretty well, especially for an SUV. We certainly have noticed that on other SUVs, so it's not exclusive to Alfa Romeo, at least the way that it works. The technology obviously is, but I think it actually performs really well. Makes this feel a little bit more like a car, but I think if you really do want a performance version and you want an Alfa Romeo, you're going to have to go with the Giulia. It does get up to speed. I mean, we're at 100, so it's certainly not as quick as some of the other performance vehicles we've featured recently even, but for an SUV, it does get the job done. You're certainly not going to have any issues getting onto the highway. And I do like it. But again, I like it for all the wrong reasons. I don't like it because it's practical. I don't like it because it's a good price. I like it pretty much because it is a show-off car. This is the car for people who like to stroke their own ego, maybe aren't going to be spending $100,000 on the Quadrifoglio. So how does this Alfa Romeo stack up in our books? Styling is certainly unique, but we like it, and it attracts attention, which we also like. We also found that the 280 horsepower engine was more than sufficient for daily life, certainly blowing the consumer market out of the water with performance. Fuel economy was also pretty decent, with an average 10.8 liters per 100 kilometers during our 1,000 kilometer plus week with this crossover SUV. The transmission and paddle shifters were also good, with little lag between gears and the fixed paddles for easier shifting during turns. But we have to talk about some of the things that we had issues with, because at $65,000 we expected more from it. The lackluster interior trim was a disappointment, and that $900 leather dashboard should have been included on these higher trims. The lack of a head-up display at this price is also strange, considering most luxury SUVs offer them. The infotainment was also an eyesore with its overly simplistic design and dated menu system. And finally, this Stelvio feels like it's got a bit of an identity crisis. It's not an overly luxurious vehicle with the lack of ventilated seats or premium cut leather like Napa, and it doesn't have the performance you'd expect with 280 ponies, so you really need to go up to the Quadrifoglio to get the most Alfa Romeo experience. Who knows what the future holds for this car? It's a new vehicle in a growing segment of crossovers, so anything could happen within the next couple years. It should also be noted that we did finally see another Alfa on the road out here. It was a 4C in red heading along Autoroute 20 through Belleuil during the week of July 2nd. Now I'm looking forward to have the chance to drive the Giulia and would love to be able to feature some classic Alfas on this show. There's a huge community of enthusiasts on Facebook and various forums online, so if you're thinking to dive into the wacky wild world of Alfa Romeo, you've got a lot of resources to tap into. Thanks for watching this episode of Test Drive Spotlight on the 2018 Alfa Romeo Stelvio TI Sport. Is this a crossover worth buying? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from our viewers and having conversations about cars and culture. Make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already done so, as we publish weekly content here for Test Drive every Monday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Until next time, take care.